Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzar-Amosi Thurlow scale,
or Mons,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello, and welcome back to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. We're continuing on our foreign film...
Foreign forays.
Yeah, foreign foray. That's pretty good.
I know.
And we're trying to do more foreign films this year because we realized that it was kind of a blind spot for us. So we have chosen a well-regarded French film called Delicatessen, directed by Jean-Pierre and Mark Carroll. So with that said, I'm going to get started. I am your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Jonathan Ian Mezzer.
I saw this movie as a child on HBO. I think it informed who I am.
I can see that.
Scott Thurlow.
Bonjour.
And Chris Morgan.
Good night.
All right, bye. Well, regardless of that intro, we're actually just going to get started. Ian, do you have a logline?
To paraphrase the great Smokey Robinson in The Miracles, there is nothing sadder than the tears of a clown when you're about to eat them.
Nice one, yeah.
He's not wrong. All right, well, with that said, why don't you get us going with the plot of this film?
So this is actually a very difficult task to summarize this concisely. Because there's the main thrust of the film, but there's a lot of side characters with their own plots in this. But I'll start with the main thrust. A clown, or I guess a former clown at this end, takes a job being a handyman at a delicatessen, but it turns out to be a ruse because the butcher of the delicatessen hires handymen to eventually eat them. The butcher's daughter falls in love with the clown. Hijinks ensue.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a end of a Disney film with the monster climbing the thing to attack them. And, of course, they defeat the cannibal father and survive. However, there's so much more going on here.
Before you go on, though, it felt a little bit like The Crow or like Dark City, like that rooftop fight scene.
But it also felt like Gaston climbing up to fight the beast. There's a lot of kind of homage going on there,
right.
But there's also a suicidal woman who constantly fails to kill herself. You have a family who sacrifices grandma in order so everyone can eat. And they're terrible people, but they're with mischievous children who have no side. They just want to cause mischief. You have a group of frogmen,
sewer dwellers
called the Troglodytes.
Very Brazil-esque.
Yeah.
Get involved in the shenanigans of this war between the surface dwellers and them. The apocalypse is happening, I suppose.
It's all post-apocalyptic as well.
Yeah.
But it could just be France. I don't know. I've never been there. And yeah, so much going on in this film. My big problem is that there's a lot of imagination here. There's a lot of good storylines going on. It reminds me, to bring it to another film, what I said earlier, of a Guy Ritchie film, early Guy Ritchie, like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels or Snatch, where they're bringing in a lot of like secondary characters with plot lines and interesting things, all to coalesce at the end to a big scene. This, to me, didn't coalesce as well as I would want it to. It was fun, but it felt more like Layer Cake than Guy Ritchie, which is, for those who don't know, a kind of fake Guy Ritchie film.
Ritchie light.
Yes.
Yeah.
Guy Ritchie-esque.
And it was clever, but it didn't necessarily, it's not a perfect film because it didn't coalesce to me. So I'm going to give it a 2.
It's tough because, like, I see what you mean, and we were discussing that, like, this plot specifically just before precast. So I very much enjoyed Delicatessen. Like, in sort of the similar vein that you said, like, Cinema Paradiso was, like, the movie for you. Like, this one is, like, it had all the shit that I love. It's, like, all this ridiculous, surreal shit's happening. It's post-apocalyptic. The cannibals, like, with the French flair to it, I guess we'll say. So I very much enjoyed it. But like if I take a step back, I do think that I may be coming down on your side in the sense that, yeah, a lot of stuff was sort of thrown into the plot, and some of it, many of things were wrapped up, but maybe not everything, and maybe not all that not all of them all that satisfactorily, I guess we'll say. So like I might also be convinced to. I was going to give it a 3, actually, originally, but having said that, I might go down to a 2 because as I thought more about it as you were speaking about that point, like yeah, it kind of like it didn't falter for me maybe as much as for you, but I will agree to the extent that like it wasn't quite as wrapped up as it could have been in general. So
it was chaos. And at times it was elegant, but it wasn't always elegant with the way they handled it. It seemed at times just pure slapstick comedy going on, which works, but again, it doesn't have that deftness to elevate it.
Yeah, I get you.
Well, I agree. I see what you're saying, Ian, because I thought the same thing last night. Because while I love the ending where they're on the rooftop and the kids are trying to play music with the things with the kitchen tools and utensils, that's the word I'm looking for. And it pans back to notice that Julie and Luistan is with the cello and the saw. I really would have liked to have... They didn't exterior pan shot up, but I really would have liked to have some kind of interior to kind of... It seemed like something was missing from the end. And it didn't have to be any kind of verbal exposition. I felt that there was something missing at the end of the narrative. I mean, you got part of it, and I on the one hand, I understand why they did what they did. He did what, but by the same token, I kind of wanted to know what was going inside the building to a certain extent because I was that invested in it. So I am going to come on your side and give it a 2. It was getting a 3, and then I kind of felt something was missing at the end. I kind of felt that they went. It was more style than substance, that tag at the end. It's not a criticism of the movie. It's just that one chunk I felt was missing. There's something that's missing.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I want to give this movie a 3 for plot because it does everything. It does the setup really, really well, and I loved it while I was watching it. And I love the ending too, but you're right. There is something. Excuse me. There is something slightly missing from the end of this that just doesn't. My God,
he's dying.
I'm dying. It's poison. There's something that just slightly doesn't completely bring everything together.
Yeah.
In the strongest way that it could have. So, I think you're right. I think I am going to give this a 2 as well. And I'll just leave it there, I guess. I don't want to go too much into it. There is there's a lot to be said about having all these different plots going on and them all having their own kind of thrust and coming to their own conclusions separately, which is pretty impressive that this movie does. Shit. I've almost talked myself back into this.
But here's the thing: since it's all about clown, I'm impressed by how much was juggled in this, but occasionally a pin was dropped, and it's this is great. It just
wasn't quite ready. I see
not a 3 for that.
Yeah, Steve. And by the way, if you have an argument for a 3,
you don't have to give it a 2.
You don't have to talk yourself out.
But for sure,
I know.
I was coming into
don't worry. I'm never afraid to give a different score than everybody else. But
we know that. But
but I feel because I was coming into the same set, the same mindset. But like I said, I was sort of convinced by you guys, or at least by E and by himself a little bit, as I took a step back and was like, yeah, it didn't perfectly get there. It wasn't all wrapped up.
I'm going to give you an example here.
Sure.
And just bring the point home. Madame Poussin, whatever.
Poussin, I think.
Yeah. She was actually a fairly developed character. She had an arc. I don't remember what happened to her.
She the last thing I remember from her is she came out of the sewer.
Yeah.
And then what he's saying?
And the thing is that was a pin that was dropped there. For a character so well developed there.
Yeah.
And for a character that was so integral to the plot. she doesn't have maybe that
She got
infernal
literally
shot would have brought
kidnapped.
it. Yeah.
Literally kidnapped,
Or
and then
if she went back
left
down
behind.
with the frogmen and found a life there, that's fine.
We just don't know.
We just don't know.
Yeah.
And it didn't have
That's
to.
a fair point.
Like we were saying, it didn't have to be anything verbal. It just could have just been a pan shot throughout
Of
the,
what's happening to all the
Oh,
surviving tenants.
That would have been great. I think you're right, Chris. That's a really good point. As they go from the kids, they pan over to Louis-san and Julie playing their instruments, and then while that music was playing, they just pan.
We just see what happens to everybody else.
Well, actually,
Delicatessen, and then down into the sewer. That would have been really
if you
cool
wanted to
end.
end up on the roof, you could have actually started in the sewer,
Reversed it,
come
yeah.
up, see the Delicatessen, kind of as you're going up, look through the windows and
Sure.
see
Yeah.
where
I see.
everybody was. I mean, like I said, it would have been a simple fix, but I definitely was feeling like there was something missing.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I'm gonna stick with a 2 on that.
Yep, me
And,
too. I feel you.
We'll move on to themes. Scott, that's gonna be you.
All right. When you're in the post-apocalyptic France, do not take a shady job from a butcher. No, it's more kind of I guess, finding a connection and/or love in such a situation, because Louis-san and Julia eventually became a couple, and her whole arc was trying to convince her father, and then them escaping the fate that befell so many other people in his spot beforehand.
Yeah.
But since you mentioned there's so many, you could almost say many of the side characters, the other tenants, if you will, had themes attached to them, to their little
Sure.
stories. So I thought that was kind of a neat idea. Again, it may not all like juggling thing now is a good analogy. They might not always hold up. All these plates spinning, perhaps not all of them are going to get there. But I mean, there were a number of them. Now that I'm thinking through it, that I thought were strongly done enough. Again, certainly their story, the story of their relationship is a central part of it. But like I said, tangentially, surrounding that is all the sort of mini arcs, if you will. Like you said, Madame Poussin, or whatever her name is. She was fleshed out more as the story went on. So you got her, why she was doing in her situation and all that. So yeah, I think it might have had maybe more themes than most, at least a number of things we've done recently. But I think they were all nicely balanced, if not all of them. The credit I just took away on plot, I'm not going to take away here. It's just that because it had to juggle so much shit, but I still think it juggled it well enough to touch on a number of decent themes.
I like the idea of connections, because the suicidal woman, her suicide attempts were all these Rube Goldberg.
I mean, it was
attempts.
fucking slapstick.
Basically, this is Rube Goldberg of the apocalypse. I mean, if you look at, and I'll probably get more of this in Antagonist, but if you look at the butcher
band name.
as the first thing that knocks down the mechanism, or the first domino, the entire building is one Rube Goldberg device.
Yeah, sure.
And just like the woman's suicide attempts, something always falters it, and it is
inevitably fucks them.
Yeah, but the film is all about connections and connections within connections, and as you said, if you break it down, there's many themes within all these little things that go on. I'm definitely giving it a 1, because it is definitely a, not to sound pretentious, a think piece, in that you do become into. It's just what's your connection? What's this connection? How are these things connected? That kind of thing.
So I really enjoy assessing apocalyptic movies by what themes. And I'm used to American apocalypse movies. This is very much not an American apocalypse.
For sure.
One, this is a soft apocalypse versus a hard apocalypse, in the sense that people are generally living their lives somewhat normally compared to, let's say, The Road or something like that. Yeah. They're not in direct threat of their lives, aside from the people who are the prey here. And that's because of one person. I feel that it's interesting that the French are looking at, the apocalypse happened, where are we getting our food? And love will conquer all. And that's such a interesting difference to, I think, the general American things, which are basically just how do we survive? How do we kill the next man in order to take their goods? No, we're going to kill a man. We're going to eat him. Because we still want
everyone gets to share in it.
Well,
exactly.
the excuse of the apocalypse was to create this microcosm that nobody could escape from. I mean, that was the purpose of yeah,
and that's why it all took place in the one building there. The only outsider you really see is the mailman bringing news,
and then the chocolate light tickets towards the
end, and the taxi driver.
Almost Wes Anderson-esque, like in terms of
absolutely
kind of
in terms of the way that it's presented. But what I wanted to say about this is, I think it's a really interesting point of all of these different characters have their own kind of themes, like almost like they wanted to break down all the themes that they wanted to present, but like have a way of compartmentalizing each one of them. So like you have the woman who's like trying to, kill herself, and like the desperation of the apocalypse. You have like the frogman who's like the slow insanity of the apocalypse kind of thing.
He's also in a way hedonist in a different way than the butcher is.
Yeah, he's got the pile of snail shells.
I was gonna say he's kind of like hoarding the butcher's hoarding like all the legumes and the corn, and he's hoarding all the snails and the frogs.
So he's the only character that's really not dependent on the butcher in this whole, other than the troglodytes. Yeah, you have their whole story of like living underground and like the whole under society type thing. You have you have all this stuff like the family that's there. That's really the only nuclear family, we'll say, that are really. It's more. It's kind of like the father is at the head of this type of thing and like responsible for providing and has to make tough decisions type of theme there,
like eating grandma.
Yeah, like eating grandma. But like but I love that they have all these themes and they do them in a very surreal, bizarre way. Yep. But there are like real consequences for each one of them.
For sure, man.
Which I think is done really well.
I think they're all very well handled.
Theme's going to be a strong one. For
me. That's what I'm saying. Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Although, again, it's close to being too many that it loses the point. But I don't think. I think that a couple of them shine through.
But it still sort of maintains itself.
I think it does a good job of maintaining. But let's move on to antagonist, Chris.
The antagonist is without question the butcher. He's also the catalyst, and if I'm going to keep using my Rube Goldberg analogy because I mean to me he was the antagonist, he was the catalyst. And he was the one, like, you would see how the dominoes would fall or whatever, and he would be the one who would always kind of, like, change up the game, because he had an agenda, because he wanted to eat Lewiston, and he also wanted to maintain control. He had this stockpile.
Right, he has a system in place, in which he's, like, the controller of it.
Yeah, so he's definitely the bad guy of the film. He's the antagonist, he's the catalyst. I thought he served his purpose well, because I love the character, even though I didn't like him. Like, he was annoying me because I'm like, I wanted certain things to happen. And he was like, I really wanted Julie and Lewiston to get together, and he was kind of fucking things up. And his mistress, who we really liked, who ended up with, we don't know what happened to her. Maybe he ended up with the troglodytes.
She's a frog woman now.
She's a frog woman. Like, everything kind of in a weird way revolved around him, and he just fucked up everybody's life. He was a manipulator, and it was just funny to watch the different ways he manipulated everybody and how they reacted to him. Like, the father was really kind of like, the father of the nuclear family was the most manipulated person in this entire film. Mm-hmm. I mean, he killed grandma. I mean, but he really did follow him down the rabbit hole, so to speak.
But man's got to eat.
The man's got to eat. And by the way, can I just say about the grandma thing? I loved how like they set up the fact that like when she was knitting at the same time, like the turntable or something was re-spindling her yarn. So it was kind of like she kept, it was in order to keep her knitting. I guess that might go into style a little bit, but I just wanted to bring it up because her death, the ball of yarn kind of played a part into her death. And, so yeah, I thought, but again, it was to service, her death was to service
to serve men.
To serve men.
To serve grandma.
To serve the... Not to serve grandma, to serve the butcher's agenda. So yeah, he is definitely a very strong one.
Yeah, no, sorry, you're good.
First of all, he's the protagonist. I mean, hardworking man raising a daughter that he cares about,
trying to make ends meet.
in a profession that is a
Sure,
noble
make something
profession.
Ends meet.
Yeah, and he's helping the people around him. He's got a system. It's only harming clowns. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I am too, by the way.
Well, we don't know what Trash Man was.
No,
Trash Can Man was not a clown, I assume.
Yeah.
certainly with that getup, he has had clowning in his past.
He may have been a mime, which
suppose.
is just as
Oh,
bad.
yes.
That's anybody who entered the ad,
Yeah.
guys.
And he has an entitled daughter. But it's a really thing. It's actually interesting that you have. He's really the archetype of the overprotective father who is stopping the love from happening.
Sure.
It just happens he's a cannibal who's killing people, and it makes him even more of a villain in that sense. But I just thought that he's really an archetype that, but it works well.
Yeah. Well, like
I agree.
That's the best is like they take that archetype and like blast it out to the like most extreme logical conclusion in the apocalypse, right? And like that's why he's a great villain of this movie, is because you understand, or like there's a point in the movie where he's like convincing himself that he's an alright guy. He's just like doing things because he has to or whatever.
Would you eat
no
corn?
one forced him
meal
to
for the rest of your life? No.
No one forced him to be a fucking butcher of humans, but he's like, yeah, I'm basically an okay
He's making
guy.
the best of it.
But like, but that's the thing that I love about a good antagonist is you understand their thought process, even if you don't agree with it.
Yeah.
And he is a well written character, and I think the actor was really good, and like I think those two things combined to make him just in this bizarre story, a super bizarre character who makes sense. If that makes
I like that.
If that works,
I agree with you, because this is a character that could have been overwritten and overacted. He could have been,
or could have fallen flat on its face
it
because
was
of the archetype.
overacted.
The
No,
whole
but-
point was it was overacted.
no, but the whole thing is he could have been much more over the top. He had just the right amount of over too much in just the right
He had
proportions.
this comic menace to him, which worked really well.
That's exactly what I was going to say, or something like it. But yeah, I mean, of course I agree. It's funny to me that the way it was set up is that I almost thought he was going to be the protagonist, like the main character, until like very quickly on. But yeah, like as sort of like the Rube Goldberg sheet is unfolding, like the tension like ramps up and escalates, and like his machinations get like increasingly like desperate to a degree, right?
Yeah.
So like yeah, I thought it was a really good villainous character for sure, highly entertaining, and like he kind of sort of straddled that line between verging on like too cliche over the top, like had just enough surreality to it. And this is true of like the entire movie itself, I would say. Right, but yeah, I thought he was very effective, and like for example, the ending was sort of like hectic duel, if you will, between like or chase between him and him and the rest of attendants versus Louison and Julie. Yeah, it was quite enjoyable throughout, and I thought he was a really good antagonist, and I will give it a 1.
Just one last thought on it. I also liked how it's really his hubris that brings down the use of a weapon that he wasn't capable of using.
He wasn't familiar with.
That's true.
Yeah.
The Australian,
Yeah.
which is such a ridiculous thing.
Which they set
in
up
and of
because
itself.
the Australian is worthless without its owner.
Yeah.
Or Louis said something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm giving antagonist a 1 for sure.
In that roof battle, I absolutely love the fact that the butcher's trying to kill Louis down with the antenna, and the woman's down there like, "Wait, that's perfect. Don't move."
I was gonna say that for style, like, and something you said about Grandma and the Yarn, but yeah,
Sorry,
like, there were definitely comedic elements like that. So it's like it's a serious fight, but like also they're like, "Hey, a little to the left" or whatever.
Yeah.
Quite good.
But sure.
All right. So let's move on to protagonist with me, and I guess that's Louison.
And Julie, I guess, to an extent.
I would say, I think I'm gonna leave it just as Louison. Feel free to try and convince me otherwise.
Right.
It probably wouldn't be that hard.
No.
But as for now, before I hear any other arguments on that, I'm gonna just talk about him. I think he is a really interesting character who, when this movie first started, within the like first 15 minutes or so, I wasn't sure if I was gonna like him, and then he just grew on me, like seemingly. And I don't know if this is... I doubt this was, like, what they were going for, per se, but seemingly, like, he grew on everybody else there, especially Julie, like, throughout the thing. I thought that he had this kind of easy likability to him that was more prevalent as the movie went on. And boy, by the end, I was like, yeah, this guy is fucking like hilarious and like great. Like he's a perfect like. He's doing a perfect transition from clown to normal dude, and like he's working on getting out of the life.
I mean, he has a sad backstory,
You know?
as well that they fleshed
like
out.
yeah, his monkey died, and
His monkey was butchered.
Dr. Livingston butchered and eaten, and Julie tried to tell him about that several times, and he was asleep or whatever with her fucking knockout tea. It's such a like I love.
There's so many random little
even just
things
talking
like
about
that.
this. I'm like, oh yeah, that fucking knockout tea scene. Like
That was awesome.
Just like I keep remembering all these like great little
like
details
moments
that
and
are
stuff.
in this movie.
Exactly.
But I was gonna say an argument for Lewiston being the protagonist is that Julie, she kept wanting to warn him, but something kept thwarting it. Whether it was the tea and he fell asleep, so she wasn't able to actually complete the picture, so to speak. So it really was you're following him, and she kind of filled in the blanks after. At the end, after like basically he had most of the story,
except that she's elevated about halfway through the film. Really start following her. She has far more agency in a lot of ways than Louison does.
Yeah, you're right.
She goes to the troglodytes. She actually causing a lot of the action in this film. And if it wasn't for her, Louison would have been eaten, maybe for the better. He's a clown after all. But
former clown, please.
I we need to do a podcast about your hatred of clowns.
I don't actually hate clowns.
I actually do. And mimes.
But
and mimes.
No, mimes are a different story. But no, when he won me over was the scene where he's making the bubbles.
Yeah.
I think I'm like,
yeah.
Okay, you're a good dude.
Yeah.
Like,
No, so like, yeah, I mean, everything you said about him, I agree with. He was an interesting protagonist, and you're right. Like, I also felt like I don't know if this guy's gonna be. And then, like, as it went on, like, I slowly warmed to him, as it seemed like the rest of the tenants did. But my argument to include Julie was like, yes, it didn't happen till maybe about like 40% or so through. But as E said, she comes up with a plan. She visits the troglodytes, like, makes contact with them, and like basically they jointly form like the plan to assault and like spirit him away so he wouldn't be eaten. And she's trying to like convince her father.
Fuck that up.
Yeah, she like she goes to her father, the butcher's like, you don't control me anymore, like et cetera, et cetera. So I think like as a joint couple and like they jointly escape it at the end, like again like in the farcical like chase scene with the water and like they fill up the bathroom, like escape that way and all that stuff.
That was a cool.
All those little all those little moments like you were saying.
I
all
feel
those
like
details.
Titanic took a fucking
No, I feel like Shape of Water ripped it off, if you will.
Well, that's exactly what we said too.
Yeah.
But either way, I'm saying I'm gonna give them both protagonists credit and give them both a 1.
Who has the greater character arc and development throughout this, Louison or Julie? And I think that Julie does. Louison really doesn't grow much in this. He's always kind of has a naivety about him. It's not like he gets over the death of Dr. He finds love. It's great. It's a very French thing to do.
As you do in France.
Maybe that's not even a character arc. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
But I think that Julie actually deciding to... Now, she was already on that path, but she decides to
this was like
go
the
against her
impetus
father.
to do that.
Well, I will say, it is said in this film that she, like, does this with every new person. She, like, falls in love with every one that he hires, and then they eventually eat him. But this one goes seemingly further than it ever has before, right? So she kind of breaks the mold of what it has been before.
Exactly.
So I don't know. That's a good question.
Ian definitely convinced me when you talked about her agency and that the fact that the climax of the film happened because of her and that he would have been eaten. But then I'm thinking about the same thing that like Lewiston was in a lot of ways the Mr. Magoo of this thing where he kind of like...
There's a lot of Mr. Magoos running around.
But like in terms of a protagonist, he and Julie, I mean, I agree with you guys that they are together the protagonist of the film. So.
Yeah, well, that's what my argument was for, and I'm giving them both a 1, but they both did a very good job.
I think I'll agree with that. I think that they share protagonist duties, especially in the latter half of the film.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, she wouldn't have the agency she wouldn't have the impetus to do this if it wasn't for Louison coming into the situation. So they share the duties there.
Right. Okay. I will agree with that. Either way, I was going to give it a 1. Mm-hmm. But it's got a double 1 now.
Yeah, giving both 2 characters
1 times 1. It's still a 1.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
And that's going to move us to supporting with Ian.
So many here.
Yeah. So many wonderful,
So
quirky
I'm going
characters.
to say 2, and then we've already talked about Frogman, who was actually one of my favorite characters. Just kind of just lying in his thing, eating
Just sitting at his-
snails.
It's super
Throwing
French.
up frogs.
He's eating snails and frogs, like obviously.
This fucking half submerged fucking
It
room.
was it's how I want to go out in the apocalypse. And then the suicide woman, Aurora,
Aurora,
who is being legitimately
fucking gaslit
Yep.
the
with-
entire time.
It is
By the toy makers, right?
yeah,
One of them.
For I don't even know his motive for doing it. Just that I
It was
kind of
his
suspected it was happening, but she thinks that the demons are talking to her.
Yeah.
But she can't kill herself. She always has to come up with this Rube Goldberg, as you guys were mentioning, machine to kill herself. It's phenomenal, and it ends up succeeding by accident in one of the.
Well, that's the whole thing. Like, I knew it was going to happen the first time it failed. I was like, oh, she's going to die by accident for sure. But it was still a great payoff to it.
Oh, yeah.
Like when the room explodes because of an accident.
I feel terrible for her husband, who is just dealing with this, and then he's dead because she's actually successful for it.
That's how things go in the
No,
apocalypse,
it's
man.
a wonderful juxtaposition.
But in a lot of ways, he wasn't really paying attention to her either.
No, but I mean, imagine him in his situation.
I suppose. But no, you're right. Like, because this is the nature of the story, is like all these weird, quirky, like borderline surreal characters. Like, some of them a bit more grounded, like you said, the family, the
Right.
husband and wife and 2 kids. But even like their kids were like, again, like pulling pranks essentially, like the whole time, like
Yeah, I feel
causing
like
mischief.
I feel like they're kids from like a Charlie Chaplin movie or something,
Kind
you know,
of like I think that was like
or like fucking
a sort of a-
Little Rascals,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. It's sort of an intentional reference there
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, I think they all. I'm giving all collectively a 1. But I was going to mention again, maybe crossover with style, but one of the gags / jokes. So when the butcher convinces the family guy to sacrifice grandma, right? So the way he does it is leading like a string of yarn down the stairs. I'm like, oh, he's going to have her trip down the stairs, and then she makes it all the way down
Yeah.
the stairs. Like it was a great
Just
subversion on that. So yeah,
And
so,
it's like, oh, then he's just gonna fucking butcher her.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm gonna scare you, and then you're gonna scream and get somebody else to come out. Like,
it kept
it's
like
all like so fucking.
again, it's a Rube
circuitous.
Goldberg thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they were all wonderful, but I didn't think Aurora that like. I just think like it's a darkly funny joke where she has like all the like she's trying to hang herself and turn on the stove and also like
And also
take
eat
pills
all the
and
pills.
yeah, like all the shit at the same time.
Also, Grandma doesn't scream because of him.
She's
Because of
just
the spider,
yeah,
yeah.
a random like other happenstance
Yeah.
thing. Sure. So they're all very, very, very wonderful, and like yeah, the frog dude was great, and even the chocolate dites themselves were like a nice addition. Like again, like about halfway through, right when in fact Julie sort of finds her agency and so forth.
Yeah.
So yeah, all wonderful secondary characters, and I give them all a 1.
The Trillites, who before that we had been basically told were like boogeymen that
yeah.
didn't exist, right? Like right before that,
And it was like
and
a
then she goes down to
1984
find them, and she fucking finds them.
And they're all Zoidbergs.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
thing. And even they were great too. Like the one
Yeah.
like heavier set guy, like as
When he
well.
gets shot,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, it's a very fun and creative movie.
Indeed.
And the thing about Aurora and her husband, I loved how bougie they were. He still wanted to maintain this
Yeah.
bourgeois lifestyle. Like he was always in a smoking jacket or a
Yeah,
suit.
that's right.
Yeah.
And when she's freaking out, he's like, "No, not Pop's clubs," or something like that.
Oh yeah,
And she throws.
She throws the golf clubs. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, your father's clubs, and throws them out the window.
yeah. And I do like I do think it goes to a lot of the You have the 2 toy makers, and they're making those cow, thing.
Sound like a
But like,
fucking goat to me
who
or
are they
whatever,
really? I mean, but they're styling up. It's like these
Who are they
people
servicing those 2 children?
are still living the lives that they had prior
Are you
to.
saying that the bourgeoisie will do anything they can to keep their lifestyle,
Even in
even
the
if it means sacrificing the working class? I think that's what it's
Shocked.
going for here.
Yeah.
Themes 2.
Double one.
Yeah, no, I mean, in a lot of ways, you can get that because she.
Well, that was the theme of their characters, as I said.
because if you look at it, he's living for style or
Opulence.
opulence,
Yeah.
and she is easily manipulated because it just shows how shallow their lives are. That one of the toy makers can get into her head. And I don't know,
Sure.
but I thought it was really fascinating that this in this microcosm, even though everybody's basically starving, nobody is really giving up their life. Previously, that
But they're
that
trying to hold
may
on
have
to it at
been
least.
or hold on to life pre-apocalypse. So I found it, even the butcher. So I found it very. I loved all the supporting characters in this.
Also, what is the the Frogman is literally just a French stereotype, like taken to the absolute extreme, right? He just
of course,
frogs and fucking snails,
and listens to the like French marching music or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's so fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, that's why it's funny.
And then you have the toy makers. Who the fuck are they making toys for?
But that's right.
Right?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, to keep the illusion.
Right. Like that. That's really. This movie's even kind of goes further down that rabbit hole than I thought originally. And
sure.
I think the Yellow Vests made a mistake. They should have gone with the chocolate uniforms.
Christ.
That's
much
true.
scarier.
That's neither here nor there.
But also, I just want to add someone to antagonist quickly that I forgot about until we talked about the mailman, the rapist, the rapey mailman.
Yeah. He is a creep.
He's a minor.
He's a creep and a half.
And he got his.
Like,
and
it's an interesting thing because I think that this movie would have been almost no different if he hadn't existed. Yeah. But like they wanted to, I feel like they wanted to. Whoever wrote this wanted to
like throw in one more
include that that dark part of like the apocalypse.
Yeah,
right?
he's the stereotypical what
like
becomes
kind of guy. Yeah,
right.
And the funny thing about him is he was this antagonist that kept coming and going, and he had the gun that they showed you, the Chekhov's gun, but they also set the glue up from the very beginning. So when the kids used the glue to go down and block up the gun, and it was just like this double-edged Chekhov's glue and Chekhov's gun, and then they,
Chekhov's everywhere.
Chekhov's
apartment, really. But
Chekhov's Rube Goldberg machine.
Exactly. Speak of that, you just made me think of that because the mailman was indeed part of like the butcher's plan because he was the one who went out and like if you recall, there's a line or two where he goes out and delivers the newspapers that have the ad for the delicatessen.
Yeah.
So that's how they get new people to come in. So like he's in on that little scheme, if you will.
And it's great that I mean, I guess we're getting into some other stuff here, but like, it's great that he initially is like, "Get out of here, man," because he was skinny. He was like, maybe we can fatten you up.
Make it work.
We'll figure it out. Yeah,
sure. But I'm giving all secondary.
But anyway,
but now I'm wondering if that's not why she gave. I mean, I know he wanted to give her his wife or his daughter the butcher wanted to give his daughter the candy and so forth. But I was kind of wondering if was that part of the thing to like let her fatten him up?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
It's a rabbit hole indeed.
It just came to me when we were talking about all this, like why that the mailman did deliver this parcel.
More rabbit holes.
And a parcel that Louis Don actually helped make sure that did get to her. So.
Yeah. True, yeah.
Well, food for thought. In the meantime, let's move on to dialogue, and that's me, Scott.
All right. So yeah, man, like it's a foreign film, so it's subtitled, but I think the tone and the expressions went a long way, and like I liked a lot of the interactions, if not all of them. It was more slapstick than some of the other ones we've done recently, but I think there was even some puns within there as well. A couple of like the butcher definitely made a butcher pun, a number of them in fact here and there. I think it was like every little interaction had its own little sort of feel to it. So like when Lewison is talking to the mistress, like that had its own like sort of. I don't know how to describe it. Like it's very hard to say it without having seen the film, if you haven't. But like I liked all the when X character was talking to Y character, like Grandma talking to
everybody had their own kind of chemistry.
Yeah, exactly.
That was different.
And like you again, it sold me a long way on believing that these people have been living in this like broken down apartment like for however long they've been doing this and like waiting on the system like. One of the early scenes is everybody waiting for the butcher, like, "Hey, did you get that shoulder cut or whatever?" Like shit like that, and like all the slapstick stuff, which maybe will go more to style in a second. But regardless, I think it all worked. I loved everyone's interactions and exchanges with each other when they were like, again, for the most part, mostly comical throughout, but not always. And when they weren't, that still worked as well for me, in those cases. So yeah. I'm giving it a pretty solid one. Like, not like fucking amazing, but I was enjoying and chuckling throughout. So,
I will give it for the Chocolatettes alone. Their banter was top notch. Actually,
fantastic,
I think.
Yeah.
And it was a much needed shift in tone. We'll talk about this a lot. So there's a lot of shifts in tone here, but done for juxtaposition and comedic effect. And they at this point in the movie when they appear, it's a really needed like to have kind of. this group, the way they view the world.
I'm going to give it a 1 just for Mademoiselle Poussin, because I mean, just what she says to the troglodyte. I mean, I agree with you with the troglodyte dialogue, but
the chocolate dialogue,
the troglodyte dialogue, But when they had her, all of her dialogue was just, I don't know, it was part delivery, it was part what she said. I mean, I very much enjoyed the dialogue. I am very much, as Scott said, a lot of the nonverbal really kind of contributed to it. But I mean, just her, the way she verbally reacted to everybody, I thought she was great. I mean, her dialogue I thought was enough to give it a 1, regardless of everything else.
Yeah, I thought, honestly, all the dialogue was pretty strong. You're right, the troglodyte, all that really comedic stuff was really good. But, you know, the interactions between Louison and Julie were good. Julie and the, what was his name? Clope, the butcher, were really good. And honestly, it was a lot of really well done, timed dialogue. Yeah. And I think that it did a really good job with that. What I wanted to mention, and actually this will be a good crossover into style as well, is that we were trying to do foreign comedies this month, and this is definitely the most comedic of the ones we've done. Which, like, the other ones had comedic elements to them, but they were probably more drama than this one for sure. This one definitely, like, verged well into the realm of, like, dark comedy, and did a really good job of that in terms of dialogue and the style. Which,
good call, good point.
I'm going to give dialogue a 1, and I think we can move on to style, unless anybody else has any other
Speaking
points.
of,
Chris, go on with style.
I don't even know where to begin, because the style of this film was phenomenal. I mean, we do keep coming back to the Rube Goldberg thing. And Grandma, the domino that starred Grandma down to her death.
Sure.
It's just hilarious. Was turning off the TV. The absence of sound woke her up, and then everything started from there. But one thing I really loved,
I almost wanted to say I was watching that.
The musical numbers, so to speak, the way they used rhythm in this was amazing, especially when fixing the spring.
I know you're going to mention that.
The dance, so to speak, where they're on the. God, if you're listening to this, it's really hard to explain. But just with Mademoiselle Poussin and Louison on the bed, just when they're getting the springs to
trying to figure out which spring is,
the way they kind of interact.
Yeah.
You know, where it is a choreography.
It's a Charlie Chaplin bit.
And that's built before that when the butcher is having sex with Poussin.
Yeah.
And then everything else in the house is like going to the same rhythm.
They're like musically like,
and they're listening to this Hawaiian music, which has a lot of the same sound that the saw does. You know, with that, it's a pedal steel. It can also be used that sound can also be done on a theremin. I mean, it's just there's so many just the audio style of this film in and of itself, the way they show the way they make the same sounds different ways, was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
So what you just said right there is that they used comedic style to show the power shift between the butcher with Poussin on the bed, to show that Louison is starting to take over as the dominant force in the.
I mean, you can definitely look at it that way.
I think it's a valid. I don't think it's too far of a stretch for sure.
No,
and I mean, like I said to you guys, this is a sort of like film that I personally love. Like, it's just something that gets to me, and like the juxtapositions and like even the colors and like sort of like the vibrancy of it's essentially supposed to be an apocalypse, but the interior of the apartments are very colorful as well. Right, so like there's that, and again, like all the juxtapositions and sort of subversion upon then a double subversion upon like an expected joke or a gag that you've seen before, but they flip it on its head, and all that stuff. Like, it all worked. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So what I just want to build off of what you just said. What I love is it's actually a lot of classical. I mentioned like Charlie Chaplin. So there's this one scene in there where Julie wants to takes her off her glasses in order to like appear more beautiful, or
right.
and she's blind as a bat, and pouring tea. And he's like had multiple cups.
Yeah, he's
Oh
like-
yeah,
he's like
that's
catching
very
it.
slapstick.
Yeah.
Like he's just like,
The thing is, but it's just classically done humor, but because they had the juxtaposition of this horrible cannibalism,
Yeah.
apocalyptic subplot,
Exactly.
I don't find it offensive that they're having
Right.
stupid stuff humor, because it just, the tonal shift in it works
Yeah,
beautifully.
Exactly. That's well said, and
completely agree.
that's one of my main pieces of evidence for give style a very, very strong one.
Yes, style is gonna be the strongest one in this for sure. I wanted to mention a couple things before we move on. So one of my favorite things is that the guy in the trash can in the beginning is listed first in the cast when they do the credits because it's in order of
Yeah.
appearance. The guy who's like peering out from the trash can and gets murdered immediately. Like all you know is his eyes
Yeah.
because he puts the fucking bag on his head. Like you can just see out from his eyes. I don't know why I found that so fucking funny.
Well,
but
the funny thing is, it's
The movie
like,
is littered
it's-
with moments like that.
it's an apocalypse, and like we've used to seeing, like in America, as Steve was saying, it's like, well, if you're going to go outside, you want to use the duct tape to seal.
yeah,
And I'm sitting here, he's wrapping himself up in tape. It's not going to protect you from radiation, is the first
Right.
thing I thought of. But then you realize why he's doing it.
Yeah.
he's just trying to fucking hide with the garbage.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's all great stuff.
And basically, like I love the double meaning of that, where he's basically wrapping himself up like a piece of meat, like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
like
that's a
as,
great
as
visual
he
gag,
like
too.
jumps in the garbage. But I also one of the things that I know, like, and these are going to be small things. You guys have mentioned most of the big sweeping like stylistic elements, but one of the small things that I noticed, which is really great, is at the end of the movie. So, like, anytime you have an outside view of the deli or whatever during the movie, it's very foggy.
Yeah.
It's very
like dust and shit.
there's a lot of like particulate in the air, and at the end of the movie, when they're playing the music, it's very clear.
Mhm.
And like that was something that I like really picked up on right away, and just like it kind of speaks to the entire rest of the style of this movie. Is like that every shot and everything about every shot is very intentional and like really well thought out. And like I said, style is absolutely the strongest part of this movie, and I'm sure a lot of it has to do with like the fact that it's a completely different style than you're used to if you mostly watch like American movies, things like that, because like a lot of this is very French, and like specifically
French as fuck is what I wrote down in my notes.
yeah, exactly. Like specifically, like this. So it was two directors, but like who's the director that did Amelie? And,
It's
not both
Junot.
of them. Junot, yeah. So like that, and also City of Lost Children.
Jean-Pierre Junot.
A very Junot style, I
Sure.
guess we'll say. But it's like, you know, it's this thinking about things in the specific way that this director thinks about things. You pick up when you watch multiple movies by him, and it's really interesting. So,
And the thing about the
Style
clear
strong
sky was they kind of set it up during at one point in the film where they were talking about, you know, they're going to say like, oh, it should be clearing soon, and somebody's like saying, no, it's never going to clear. They
Yeah.
kind of set that up early on.
Yeah, they did mention you.
And two quick things I wanted to say was
Who
like,
knew that killing that butcher would stop the
That's all it
apocalypse from
takes.
happening?
Yeah, man.
that's all
well,
it takes.
Break the cycle.
to the color thing, I noticed that, you know, Julie and Louis Stan's rooms are red. The bourgeoisie were green,
Mm-hmm.
and the you know, the working class family what didn't really have quite. So I
It was like beige. It was like
it's
bland.
kind of like beige,
Yeah.
but I did notice the color. I was trying to find a connection there. Those were some observations I made, and to slapstick, and I want to bring this up because slapstick I either love or hate. There's very
Yes.
little in it. Like we discussed Duck Soup, where they like broke the
Why are you
narrative
bringing? No, we're having a great time here talking about Delicatessen.
Bringing me down.
Bring up
because I
Duck
wanted
Soup.
to take a shit on that again.
All
No,
right.
but my whole point is they integrated the slapstick. The slapstick was actually a storytelling point, and I
Sure.
the way I guess Charlie Chaplin is. But I really did again want to build on what you guys say. The kudos that the slapstick was just
Kudos all around.
yeah. I guess that's it. The slapstick was great. It was integrated, and
Yes,
I really
worked.
enjoyed it.
It worked in this case very, very well.
Good stuff. All right, well, let's move on then to recommendation, and that is going to be a myself. I am going to say watch Delicatessen, or else I'll come find you and make you into meat. It's a great movie. It's just fun apocalypse, which I feel like we don't get that much anymore. Apocalypse is all sad and depressing now. Go back, watch this movie. It's a fun apocalypse.
Make the apocalypse funny again.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I mean, I'm going to second that. Yeah. I was not quite familiar. Like, you guys, I guess you had seen it as a kid, you said, Eve. I had never heard of this movie, but now having seen it, like, as I said, it has all the shit that I love in a film like this. So I absolutely highly recommend it. It's easily enough available. And again, it's a shorter-ish movie, and it just hits a lot of points that we said. And yeah, it's very, very enjoyable and a fun ride.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make a descriptive cocktail quickly. It's maybe 2 parts Terry Gilliam, 1 part early Tim Burton, and 1 part Wes Anderson.
Almost a little Besson, too. Like
Yeah,
Fifth
definitely
Element
some
style,
Besson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Little dash of
Besson.
Little dash.
I'll allow it.
Garnish.
And the thing is, I don't want to compare, because it's your own unique beast, but it's very entertaining, very creative, and it's worth a watch.
Indeed.
I think it was great. I totally recommend this film. And the funny thing was, Jean-Pierre also directed Alien Resurrection, which isn't a good film, but it's a very funny and amusing film that actually has...
Is there a lot of slapstick?
Does it feel French?
Weirdly, yes, it does, and it's written by Joss Whedon. But the thing, there is some slapstick in it. But but my whole point is, watching this film and thinking back of that film, I'm like, I actually appreciate this film more, because all of a sudden there's like, it's not nearly as good as this film, but there's a lot of attention to detail in this film, and there was a lot of attention to detail in Amelie and City of Lost Children, and it's just a spectacular film to watch. It is just a great watch.
Yeah, I
mean, you can turn the sound down, and still there's you can get the story even without the subtitles in a lot of ways. Not completely, but
there's a lot of visual. I mean, you could. Yeah, you said without subtitles. I was going to say you turn the sound completely off. It doesn't fucking matter.
Maybe not with the sound, but without subtitles between the sound and the color and the it's just
it is a visual feast.
It is it's a great movie.
Well said.
Yeah,
man.
All right. So, anybody else have any final words about visual feasts? All right. Well, let's finish this off. We gave Delicatessen a 9 overall. For all the same reasons.
I think it deserves that. I think it's earned its 9.
I think it's I think it's up there. So let's wind it down. Ian's about to fall asleep.
I'm just hungry.
I have been your host, Stephen Hermosi, joined today by Jonathan Mezzer,
Clown meat,
Scott Thurlow,
and I'm going to go join the Troglodytes right now,
and Chris Morgan.
Mimes are the silent killer.
And with that, we'll see you next time.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?